Happy Sunday. April 13th. It's about 12:30 p.m. West Coast time. I did a post a few days ago. I've been talking to my brother a lot. His predominant emotion over the last several weeks has just been a lot of anger. And my predominant emotion has been fear. And I still have that, but the anger is building. And it's these these young men who were deported to a prison in El Salvador, arguably one of the worst, most violent prisons on the planet, in Central America, in a country that's basically run by a dictator who just landed today in Washington, D.C., and is going to be meeting Trump in the Oval Office tomorrow, and who Trump and his administration paid $6 million to house, to imprison these 200 young men, the vast majority of whom have never been convicted of a crime. They have no criminal records. Their crime is being in the United States while being brown. Um, and three of these young men, specifically Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who has been ordered by the Supreme Court, the government has been ordered by the Supreme Court to facilitate his return to the United States. And the young man who is gay, who's a hairdresser named Andre, I can't fathom what that young man has experienced over the last month inside this prison, if he's still alive. And the third man who was included in this group and sent to this prison because he had an autism awareness tattoo. All of them were here in the United States legally. All three of these men. Mr. Abrego Garcia has been here for over a decade. He's married. He's been working. He and his wife have three kids. One of his kids has special needs. And this administration put him in this prison and is telling the federal courts that they don't have the ability to get him back, despite an order from the Supreme Court, despite affirming an order from a lower court. And that judge held another hearing on Friday following that Supreme Court decision. And this administration, its DOJ, still refused to answer the most basic questions. Where is he? Is he alive? What have you done up to this point to get him back here? And what are you going to do in the future to get him back here? And they're refusing to answer these questions. And then yesterday, in response, they had to file a declaration yesterday with the court on Saturday by 5 p.m. And it was filed by a guy named Michael Kozak, a senior State Department official. And he included the sentence that Mr. Abrego Garcia is detained pursuant to the sovereign domestic authority of El Salvador, which is not true. He didn't stand trial for anything in El Salvador. He's not been convicted of a crime in El Salvador or in the United States. He's being held in that prison because Donald Trump gave their president $6 million to do so. And then yesterday, Donald Trump put up a Truth Social addressing these young men. Well, I'll just read the whole thing. Looking forward to seeing President Bukele of El Salvador on Monday. Our nations are working closely together to eradicate terrorist organizations. What? What terrorist organizations? And build a future of prosperity. President Bukele has graciously accepted into his nation's custody some of the most violent alien enemies of the world, and in particular the United States. None of these men was given a hearing. The government has presented no evidence in a court that any of these men is a terrorist, is a gang member, has committed any crimes. No evidence. These barbarians are now in the sole custody of El Salvador, a proud and sovereign nation, and their future is up to President Bukele and his government. They will never threaten or menace our citizens again. Again, these young men have been convicted of nothing in the United States that has been provided to the government. The government has provided no evidence that any of these young men is a gang member, any gang, is a member of a terrorist organization, has committed any crimes, or has been convicted of any crimes. And we know of now at least 3 of them who were included in this shipment, this human trafficking shipment to El Salvador by mistake. And in their briefing to the Supreme Court, you know, the DOJ argued that it is this president's position that he be permitted to deport anybody he wants to from the United States, including United States citizens, to places like this prison in El Salvador, and that the courts don't have the right to review any of that. And so, yeah, so the fear is still there, but now the anger is really kicking up a notch. I've been extremely angry over the last few days, and that's been challenging to deal with. You know, because it's like when you have PTSD, you got to regulate your emotions all the time anyway. And when an overwhelming amount of anger starts creeping in on a consistent basis, it just makes that job that much more difficult. But I'm extremely angry. I'm extremely angry now. And I'm also incredibly fearful for these young men. If they're still alive, I hope they are. And I hope we find out soon.